Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of Floss Weekly. This week, Gareth Greenaway joins me. We're going to be talking about setting up computer labs for kids in need. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Floss Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Floss Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Gareth Greenaway. Episode 323, recorded January 28th, 2015. Kids on Computers. It's time for Floss Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you each week, or as often as I can do it, the movers, the shakers, the big projects, the little projects, projects you may be using every day and not aware of it, projects you may have never heard of and now want to go download immediately after the show. I know I do that every once in a while as well. Joining me this week, back by popular demand, Gareth Greenaway. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Randall. Thanks for having me.
You know, it's been so long since we've talked. You don't call, you don't write.
I know. I've been sequestered. I've been deep in planning of a large event, and they don't let me out.
We'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the show, and we can give the discount code one more time before I guess the discounts or the show is almost upon us anyway. So you're speaking to us again from your secret bunker in Thousand Oaks.
My secret bunker in Southern California.
Okay, cool. We won't give the exact latitude longitude because we don't want any ICBMs thrown at you there. And I am back, as you can see if you're watching the video, back in my Portland apartment. And this week, unlike 2 weeks ago, it's a gray sky out there, so hopefully there won't be any light traveling across my face. Pretty crazy stuff that way. And I am just back from Cuba. And that's the reason I wasn't on the show last week. I have a little bit to say about that at the end of the show, including some props. I've got props with me, so we can actually see the whole thing. And let's see. Before I get started with the show, I do have a very, very special request. Because the deadline's only a few days away, so if you're not watching this live stream or you watch the show within a couple days, it won't matter. But I want to get nominated this year for Podcast Awards. So go to podcastawards.com. And I think the appropriate category is technical. So I think that's kind of the thing I want you to suggest. I've been also putting on a Google Plus, stuff like that, because I really would like to win the technical category this year. I've come close a couple times, but you guys got to nominate me first to actually even be on the ballot for voting. So yeah, cool. So I already brought Gareth on. The project today is Kids on Computers. And Kids on Computers is an organization, a nonprofit organization, NGO, that's going around and trying to set up laboratories where kids can, kids that normally wouldn't have access to computers will have access to computers, even sometimes the internet, which is pretty amazing when you consider that, a lot of people don't have access to the internet in a lot of places. So it sounds like a really worthwhile project. As I was going through the notes this morning, I noticed that I actually have a connection in a couple ways to Kids on Computers without realizing it. They got a grant from Linux Fund before I joined. So I don't know how long that is. We'll have to ask our guest. Oh, I didn't even say the guest name yet. Avni Khatri, it's probably close. Anyway, and also they have received donations from Free Geek, which is in my hometown here, Portland. And I think maybe David Mandel was probably, who's in common to both of those organizations, and probably had something to do with both of those. So anyway, good friend of mine. So we'll bring Avni on in a couple of minutes, but Gareth, what can you fill in?
So I've been following the project for a couple of years, and I've known Avni for a couple more years beyond that. But yeah, from what I understand, it's a great organization. They're trying to get computers running open source software into
is that just me?
Into the countries where they don't usually have access to them. So it's a great organization.
Cool. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guest, Avni Khatri. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you doing? Thanks for having me today.
Yeah. And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm speaking from Boston, so we're just getting out of this big nor'easter that we had this week. So we're all shoveling and trying to survive the snow.
Yeah, it was actually pretty fun to go to Cuba for a week, and the weather there was like constantly 70 and 80, getting away from these cold 20 and 30 and 40 that we're having here in Portland. So that was pretty cool. But this is not This Week in Weather or This Week in Geographic Locations. It's This Week in, no, it's not this week. I've done that before. It's Floss Weekly. So why don't you give us the 30,000-foot view of what problem Kids on Computers solves and how it got started?
So Kids on Computers was started in late 2008, early 2009, and it actually got started at the idea of KOC, Kids on Computers, got started at scale back when a few of the attendees were like, well, wouldn't it be really cool to set up computer labs in areas where kids don't have access to technology and install open source software on them, so they don't, these poor areas, they don't have to pay licensing fees for software. So it was started by three people, Stormy Peters, who's still a very active member, and she's on our board, Raghavan Srinivasan, and Dan, and I'm forgetting his last name, but they all got together. Dan pushed Stormy to like, hey, let's do this, and it kind of came to fruition that way. And I joined about a year and a half later, and we started with setting up labs in Mexico. And the idea was that we have strong local connections there. Stormy's dad was a professor at a university, a technical university down in Oaxaca, which is in the Oaxapan region, UTM Oaxapan. And he knew a lot of local folks, and he knew a lot of the local community, and he was able to help identify schools for us. So Thomas worked with the local community, said, this is a really good school, and got the community involved. They actually built the lab next to the school, on the school grounds, put construction, the parents were doing construction to house the computers. And we had a FedEx grant at that time to ship these 30 desktops to Oaxapan, and that's how our first lab came to be. And we installed Linux on them. We started out using Ubuntu. We've kind of migrated and tried different distributions since then, but our hope is really just to really provide access to technology and through that access for education, so that these kids and their communities can better their lives and better their communities.
Wow, cool. Now, if I were to walk, just make it a little more concrete, if I were to walk into one of these labs, what would I see?
So you would see, it depends on the lab. So we've transitioned quite a bit from doing desktops, because we've moved toward laptops, because one, they're easier to get through customs, and even tablets now. So you'd walk in, you'd see a requirement that the lab is secure. So you'd see a locked door with, usually there are bars on windows with tables set up around the walls, with computers on them, with laptops on them. If the kids are there, you might see a group of kids using them. Usually they pair or triple up, 2 to 3 per computer. They're all excited. They're probably playing Tux Math or Tux Type computers, or or you might even see a mom on the computer, a mom who came in during the middle of the day who decided she needed to, read a little bit of offline at Wikipedia. So it really varies. It's really exciting. It's so exciting to see the lab set up, to teach the students and see it actually come to fruition. Yeah.
Is the training mostly one-on-one, or are there classroom setups that would talk about something for a while, then go into the actual lab area?
So that's actually one of the toughest things that we work with. How do we build a curriculum for these students and these teachers who themselves have not really ever used computers? So we work with the teachers on trying to help them build a curriculum. And in our ideal world, what we'd like is that all subject teachers are trained on using the computers and learning how they can leverage the technology and the content on the computers for augmenting their traditional curriculum. What happens when we set up a lab, we usually have a couple of training sessions, group training sessions with teachers, and we show them all the different applications like OpenOffice, LibreOffice, Khan Academy, Wikipedia, and all the games that are available. We train them on it several times, and then we'll do a couple of sessions with the students, And then after the lab setup is complete, we try to have a local contact, a local technical contact who's available to the school to help while, like, after we leave, and to also keep in communication with us. So and that's a work in progress. Like right now we're working with UTM Wahapan to define a more structured curriculum and have UTM, the university, help with training of the teachers so that there is like a quote unquote KOC certification, like you're a certified KOC computer teacher.
Cool. And a few years ago, we had the sugar on a stick guy on the show program, and it sounds like you're running parallel courses down the same, trying to solve the same problems. Have you talked to the sugar people? Have you considered using sugar on a stick so the kids could take it home if they have a home computer too?
So Sugar OS is the one that ran on OLPC, is that right?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
but it's an independent project now.
Yeah, it was an independent project. No, we haven't talked to the sugar people. I know we talked to OLPC a while back. I think a couple of us had reached out. I think it was Stormy that had reached out and talked to OLPC, but it's for some reason I don't think we've explored sugar on a stick yet. So that's something we could look into.
And it's really nice too because it's the OLPC software is designed to teamwork really well. So you could have two kids sitting on two machines next to each other, and they would see each other as icons, and they could talk to each other and cooperate on things, which I don't think would be very easy in an Ubuntu environment. Unless it's something you're using, makes that easy.
Like sharing. Can you explain that a little bit more? So sharing.
Yeah. Like they would both see, for example, icons of each other, and they could chat with each other, and they could both be looking at the same, not squeak. What is on the OLPC? Some sort of small talk available on there, and with tile-based programming, and they could both be looking at the same thing, and even though they're sitting next to each other on their own machines. And the other advantage sugar on a stick is, like I said, it's actually booting off of a USB key, and so all their work is in their hand when they walk away from it. And that means if they find another PC somewhere, they can just plug it in and boot that again. So if they, like I said, if they have a PC at home, they can just carry their homework with them in their hand.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. No, right now it's the software is installed on the computer directly. We do have local network set up for delivery of the large content, because not all the laptops that we get are big enough to store the content that we want to give the students. But we don't have anything where the students can work side by side on their own independent computers and see each other. So that would be cool. Yeah, we'll definitely look at that.
So one of the things I was thinking about while you and Randall were discussing kind of setting up these labs in the remote locations, how do you handle like support or like ongoing kind of if the machines need maintenance or if they have a problem, or how do you set them up to be able to do you set them up to like to take care of it yourself, take care of them themselves, or how do you handle that situation?
So we've evolved in the way we do that. I mean, our primary and first our first line of action is trying to have a local contact at each lab. Like we set up 3 labs in Morocco in October, and we worked with the Peace Corps to do that, right? So we had Peace Corps volunteers in the region identified who are responsible for each lab, and we have quarterly communications with them, or we're trying to have quarterly communications with them. We had one just a month ago. So we're in order to get a status update on the lab and help them troubleshoot, because it's very difficult to find expertise in Linux and expertise in open source in these remote areas. So we just look for an English, like somebody who can communicate with us, an English-speaking person ideally, though we have a lot of Spanish-speaking volunteers for the Mexico lab. So that's our first line of defense, like having someone who's local who can communicate with us to tell us what's wrong. The next thing like we're working on is improving the software and the install. So we started with Edubuntu, we went to Lubuntu, and now we're doing Ubermix deployments. And there's an easy reset option on Ubermix. So when we have that local contact, they're like, this computer's broken, this computer's not working, we can give them the reset command, and they can at least get the computer back into the state so that the student can use it again. And that's our approach. But it is one of the most challenging things, because for some reason, like people in these remote areas are not comfortable emailing us or comfortable asking us questions, and it's been a challenge. So we're trying to improve teacher skill level on one hand, trying to improve local communication with us, and then trying to make the software easier to manage. So like a three-pronged approach.
Cool. So we mentioned OLPC a bit, and there's a little bit of similarity with what OLPC had tried to do and what you guys are trying to do. One of the most interesting stories I heard about OLPC was where they sent a whole box of the laptops to a small village in Africa, and they didn't open them. They just like left them in place and waited for like the villagers to kind of discover them and work it out for themselves. Have you guys seen something similar to that when you've deployed the labs? You've kind of like deployed the labs and stood back and just waited to see what happened?
I thought that was so cool. I had read about that, and I thought that was awesome. I was like, oh, that is so cool. Kids are amazing, right? They're just so amazing. Our usual experience is that as soon as we get the computers up and running, and it's actually varied. There are some people that are afraid. There are some students, some kids that are afraid. They're like a little bit hesitant. They've never used a mouse before. A single click, double click concept is very new to them, and they don't understand like, okay, a double click will actually open up an application. A single click selects it. But other times, like we'll have and it works amazingly in pairs, but we'll have students, as soon as the computer is like on the table, they'll like start playing with it, try to turn it on. They'll find Tux Math. They'll find any game that's on the computer that like brings them excitement and joy. They'll somehow find it. Like Mr. Potato Head is a favorite. Just learning how to use the mouse and being able to have good motor control. So we've seen a huge variation. I think in some cases it works, and in some cases like they just pick it up on their own. In some cases they need to be pushed or taught a little bit more. And the other thing I've learned is that they learn from each other, right? So that's why the pairs and triplets work with each other. You'll have someone who's not as familiar with computers working with someone who is, and they really pick it up by just watching the other person or watching each other. And it's really, really just, it's the excitement of being around them when they're like at the computer for the first time is like, it just makes all the work that goes into setting up a lab worth it.
Once they have the labs in place, like how much freedom do they have to kind of install additional software? Is it pretty wide open, or is it locked down to a point where what's installed by you guys is kind of what is there?
So that's a good question, and I think it varies. It varies upon a couple of things. It varies on the culture of where we are, and it varies on internet connectivity. So a lot of the schools where we are, actually I would say a majority of our 16 or 17 labs don't have internet connectivity. So them installing something is a moot point, right? They might, sometimes kids they're pretty clever, right? They'll get a CD or a USB stick from home and they'll bring it in with their favorite software. And it's probably like some application that works on Windows, and they'll try to install it on the machine. And that doesn't work. But usually like if they don't have internet, usually there's no software installed. For the schools that do have internet, like in India, when we set up the main lab that we have in Assam, we had internet connectivity the first couple of weeks we were there, and the kids immediately went to Facebook, immediately went to, they're just going, like, they mentally started searching on Google, they started searching, on just like popular sites, and you're like, well, how do you know about these? Like, how do you know about these sites? And they're like, oh, we go to the internet cafe down the street, our parents let us go. And so they know what's there. They don't, I don't think they're advanced enough to really, I don't think most of them are at least, or familiar enough with computers to install software on their own, or we haven't seen that, even when there's an internet connectivity. And permissioning wise, we don't lock it down yet, though we could be more strict about it. But the teachers themselves are usually, like, because for the teachers, this is an unknown thing too, right? They don't have a lot of experience with computers. And that's one thing I want to mention. Like, the kids are much more free and willing to explore the computers, and the teachers are a little bit more hesitant for some reason, right? They're a little bit more like, oh, what's this? Let's be careful. Let's like really let's treat it as a treasure. And the kids are like the opposite. They're like, we got to use it. So it's huge variance. But for the most part, we haven't had trouble with software downloads or.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the questions, the kind of follow-up questions for that is, for the locations that don't have internet access, how do you handle, say, like security updates for the software that's installed?
We do it so for our labs that we have, like our Mexico labs, we try to go back once a year and do an updates on all of our labs. I mean, Mexico is becoming it's becoming more logistically challenging to manage, like in a 1 week or even a 2 week trip, because we have 8 labs down there now. But we try to go to each single lab that we have, run all the updates that we need to, and we bring install media. I mean, that's what so if they don't have internet, we bring install media and try to run the updates then. And Mexico, we try to visit once a year. Most of our other labs, we're trying to do once every other year. We don't want it to be a model where it's, you get the computer and we walk away. We're very much trying to make sure what we have runs well. We don't want it to be, oh, here's a computer, we're dumping it over the wall, good luck. Like we're trying to do the follow through, the education aspect of it, the training aspect of it, and, the upkeep as well.
Okay. So of all the places you guys have set up labs for, what location has been the most challenging, and like what reason has it been the most challenging?
I would say every place has its unique challenges, and I think that's one of the cool things about Kids on Computers is, like, we're looking for areas where kids don't have access to technology. And I want to say, like, we are looking in the States as well. We have a couple of volunteers. Thomas, who's our main primary contact for Mexico, he's also looking at some Native American reservations in the Dakotas to identify just disadvantaged kids, right? So it is one of the cool things. Like every place has different challenges. It's like you're talking about learning a new, like usually like language challenges, cultural challenges, like cultural norms, like what's expected there, and then just the complexity of the project. And I can go into a little bit about each location if that's interesting to folks. I don't know.
Maybe it's like one location, like an example of like challenges you guys faced.
Sure. So why don't I do, India. So we were in Assam. This was back in 2013, November 2013. We were in Assam. We're setting up labs. We have a local volunteer there who is he's from that region. His parents or his dad is still there. His sister and her family is still in that region. So he was the one who provided us local contacts in that area. And he has an uncle who is on a school committee there. But the town, Morrigaon, or the district of Morrigaon, where the schools or the labs were going to be set up, is about 2.5 hours from the main city of Khatri in Assam. So the district of Morrigaon doesn't have flushing toilets, doesn't have any of that, and it's 2 hours. So Thomas, it was basically the volunteers that went were Vedanta, Thomas, and I. Vedanta is the one from that region, and we decided that we're going to. We were going to stay in Guwahati because Vedanta was like, no, you have to stay in a nice place. You really want to stay, in a hotel with flushing toilets. Really trust us. So we did. But then every day we were commuting, like we were in the van for 4 hours, like 2 hours there, 2 hours back. And so I mean, there's just like, and it's a small community. They're so welcoming. Every single community is like so welcoming. But for India, it was like logistical challenges. And I think next time I would be comfortable actually staying in Morrigaon. That's what I told Vedanta. Thomas and I both told him that we're going to stay in Morrigaon because we don't want to do this travel on this winding mountainous road, like 4 hours every day. So that's been a challenge. I think other challenges, like in Morocco, I want to give this example because it's very culturally very different than the U.S. And very different from our other locations as well. They teach boys and girls separately. Like one of the boarding schools we're at, they teach boys and girls separately. And we had the lab placed in the girls' area, right? So it's been a challenge logistically to figure out, well, how do we make time for the boys to come and make use of the computers? So a large part of our work, like there's a huge technical component of our work, and that happens usually before the trip. We're prepping, we're getting the software ready, and there are technical hurdles there too, right? Like making sure we have the right software. But a large part of our work is also like learning how to work with these different cultures, different communities, and talking to people. And so it's really enriching, and I don't know, it's been, for me, it's been life-changing. So it's opened my eyes to like a whole new world.
That's interesting. So how do you identify the locations where you're going to set up a lab?
So that's a good question. And I think we have a set of criteria on our website, kidsoncomputers.org. Like if people are interested in setting up a lab in their area, like we have a certain set of criteria that we require. You have to have a room where the computers can be locked. There's a safe, like it's a safe location, like bars on the window. You have to have a teacher willing to teach computers, like somebody with enough computer knowledge or willing to learn enough computer knowledge to be able to run the class. And then ideally you'd have a local technical contact as well. So that's our minimum requirements. And then if a school comes to us, sends us photos, or a volunteer, it's usually a volunteer that brings us a school. Like a volunteer will go, hey, I'm from this area. I know this school, or this is a school I went to. We have a new volunteer in Mexico who's doing that for a school in Oaxaca City that we're about to vote on. He's like, I went to this elementary school. My brother goes there. This is a great place. Here are photos. This is Gustavo. So he's like, this would be great to have a lab here. And then the board votes on it. We like examine the criteria. We discuss it in our monthly meeting, and we see like how are we going to get computers, like, and then we make it happen. So.
Cool. Hey, of course, just when I'm about to ask my question, the stupid lawnmower shows up. That's one of the shows, but so I'll probably have to cut back out over to you for a second, Gareth, after I ask a couple of questions. I'm curious, actually, Avni, how much of your time is spent working with kids on computers, and how much is spent in what must be a day job? Because I don't imagine kids on computers gives you a huge salary.
No, actually, so our organization is all volunteers. So we're completely volunteer based. And it's, so how much, I would say, so I'm currently president of the org, so I'm expected to give more of my time, I think, than most people. So I would say it varies depending on if a trip's coming up or if an event's coming up. But about 8 hours, I would say it can really vary. It will be like between 4 to 8 hours a week, usually in the evenings. Yeah. And we have our monthly call, and then there's all the prep work, and then just keeping our site up, doing inventory management. I mean, there's a lot of just management of logistics, and like looking at software, looking at what's the right tools, like talking with potential partners, and then talking with local communities.
And how many volunteers are currently working with you? Kind of rough count, I guess.
So we have about 20, I would say about 20 active volunteers, and then we have about 50 people on the mailing list, 50 or 60 people on the mailing list, I think.
And I presume you have like an IRC chat for real-time communication?
We actually use Skype. We have a chat and Skype. Yeah, one of our marketing leads, Corey, she set that up for us, which is really nice because people can just post questions and we'll answer it. So we use Skype right now for our IRC, which is interesting. So that's another thing. Our volunteers are really like very diverse. So we have like really technical people, and then we have people who are really good at dealing with communities. Like they're a little bit older, they're like, retired. And they have never used IRC. Like if you mentioned IRC to them, they'd be like, what's that? Like we understand phone. So Skype has been a good middle ground for us.
Cool. And so what brought you to be a KOC volunteer at the beginning? You might have said it already, but I must have missed it.
Okay. No, I don't think I did. So it's like a really cool story, but I went to the Grace Hopper conference. And I had met Stormy at scale, like I think a long time ago, like probably over 10 years ago now, but went to the Grace Hopper conference back in 2008 2008 or 2009, I think. And I reconnected with I was really inspired by the conference, and I reconnected with Stormy there. And I was like all happy and inspired after the conference. And, I went on my own way. I was working at Yahoo at the time. So I went back to Yahoo, and my manager at the time, he was like, he had asked the whole team, this whole team of 60 people, like, okay, plan your 1 year, 5-year and 10-year goals, career goals. Like, what are your 5-year, 10 goals? And in my, and he had asked us this before the conference. So I went back after the conference and I looked at my goals, and in the 5-year goal column was setting up computer labs for, kids in, internationally. Like, that was just out of the blue. That was something I wanted to do. I hadn't talked to Stormy about kids on computers at all, at the conference, but I went back and I was inspired, and I was like, why do I have to wait 5 years to do this? Why can't I do this now? So I searched online. I was like, organizations that set up computer labs in poor countries or in areas where kids need help. And I saw Kids on Computers. I saw Stormy's name in association with it. And I was like, wait, I just saw her at the conference. So I sent her an email, and it's like the rest is history. So I've been super involved for the last 4 years.
And obviously got a lot of respect of your fellow volunteers to be elected to president of the organization for the last couple of years, right?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I hope so.
And what's the hardest part about being a president for an organization of all volunteers?
I always feel like we can be doing more. There's so much to do. So I have a hard time. I think I could give 40 hours a week to Kids on Computers, like if it was feasible. I mean, there's so much to do, and there's such a huge need. And I feel like we're really filling a big gap. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Apparently, a couple of people in our chat room have been Googling you while we've been on the show, because they mentioned, she's worked with OpenACS. Can you tell me what that is and what your relationship is to that project?
Sure. So OpenACS is this is how I got started in open source, actually, and why I was at Scale back 11 years ago, probably. But it's an open source framework for building community-based websites. I would say it's like the precursor to Django is how I would frame it. But it's a strong community-based framework it's a toolkit for building sites like photo.net. It runs on it. It's just a web stack, and it comes with user groups and users groups and permissioning system out of the box, along with a suite of applications that you can install, such as like forums, chat, actually, wiki. And we use it at my current job at Mass General. We use it here, though we're looking at potentially transitioning. But I was on the leadership. I was on the technical committee for a year. I served on the technical committee, and then actually making commits. I helped with a big accessibility project, making the toolkit accessible. And it has. I started using it when I was at UCLA, and it's very university based. So there's educational software that comes that's built upon OpenACS. So it's being used in universities in Vienna and Madrid, and actually it was used initially. It was used at MIT Sloan as well. So quite a few, yeah. But it's a great toolkit. It lets you get a lot done quickly, though it's a little more obscure now.
So going back to the Kids on Computers discussion, how do you acquire the computers? How do you get the computers that you set up in the labs?
So that's a great question. So we started we evaluate. There's a couple of ways we do it. So we started out saying the idea behind it that Stormy, Dan, and Raghavan. Sorry, his last name is Srinivasan. Raghavan came up with was people in the U.S. after 2 or 3 years, they throw their they not throw their computer away, but they're done using it and they get a new one or they recycle it. And these computers are relatively pretty good. These Windows Mac computers, even Linux computers, they're relatively pretty good. So why not ask people to donate to our org and essentially take those computers to these countries and set them up. So we did that for a long time. I think as as we started scaling and getting bigger, we learned that one, when every computer in a lab is different, it's really hard to maintain. It's like you have different there's different different BIOSes, different things, and it's very hard to have a standard install that works on all the computers. So we even had a program through Recycle, I think it was, and I think it was. I don't see them on our site anymore, but I'm not remembering the name, and I know we worked with an organization in Colorado that would give people would donate computers to them, and they would give them to us. We've also had cases where like banks would say, okay, there's like a set of 30 computers or set of 40 computers that you can have. They take the hard drive out, so we ended up with like LTSP installs and doing interesting things. But we would get, the way we look at it is like if it's a bulk donation, then it's and all the computers are the same. That's a better option, even if the computers are a little bit older. And we had a set of computers donated from a school in LA. More recently, we've transitioned to looking for grants. We've received a few two Yahoo Employee Foundation grants, and we set up our labs in India with them. And what we'll do is it's a grant for $5,000. So we go to India. Vedanta found a local supplier, and we set up computers. We bought computers in country from a local vendor there for relatively cheap. It was like $250 or $270 per computer, a desktop. So we didn't have to worry about shipping desktops or lugging laptops through customs, and that's worked great for us because the computers are all the same. They're new. Everything, software just goes on much more easily. In Morocco, we did a hybrid model. We did one lab that was completely new computers with a grant that we received from, I believe it's Randy, our vice president's company, United Way, and we did one lab with that, those funds, and then another lab we actually brought laptops through customs, and the Peace Corps volunteer helped set up the papers and documents so we could get the laptops through easily. So it's very we're very flexible and fluid in the way, like we're a very organic group. So we're willing to figure out a way to make things work, whether it's old computers or new computers. The old computers, we end up beating our head against the desk sometimes, which is really frustrating.
So one of the things that while you were talking about the sources that you get the computers, and you mentioned getting donations, and one of the things that I was thinking about was one of the problems a lot of groups in the United States face when receiving donated hardware is there's the forms and various things you have to fill out saying you won't dump it into a dumping ground after a certain year, because then the company is donating is responsible for hazardous waste or something like that. Is that something you guys face when you're taking these computers to other countries? Do they have similar issues like that?
Yeah, that's a great concern. So we had that concern in Mexico because it's one of the reasons we've had such a tough time getting old equipment through Mexico. They're like, we don't want Mexico to be a dumping ground for old equipment. Like, what are you doing with these computers? And we would even have letters from officials at the state level, and it was still difficult. So we definitely run into that problem. We haven't encountered anyone telling us absolutely no. It's usually we either pay a fee to get the computer, we pay a fee to the government to get the older equipment through, or we try to work with government officials and show them that, that we're a legitimate org trying to do legitimate things and that we're responsible for the computers.
Okay. So shifting gears a bit, you will be presenting a talk at Scale, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I'm so excited. We're having a summit, a Kids on Computers summit. So this is our first, it's our first event it's our first event where we're not the volunteers are going to meet up because we're a very distributed group. We're international, right? We have volunteers in Mexico, Boston, Colorado, California, Texas, Pennsylvania. So we're very distributed, and we never get to see each other except on lab trips, like when we're setting up a lab. So this is our first event where we're actually going to get to hang out with each other, see each other, and not have the additional like logistics and stress of like, okay, we're trying to work with the local community and set up like 3 labs. And so it's super exciting. So we're going to have a couple of events, and one of them is a talk about enabling education through technology, which I'm super excited about. Yeah, and it's going to be a panel of, I think it's going to be five or six volunteers, depending on who's getting visas and who's able to come.
Can you talk a bit about what like, if anyone's listening and anyone, like, if that sounds interesting to anyone, what they would expect going to that panel, what they can expect to hear?
So they will hear from each volunteer. They'll hear about their personal experiences, about like what it's like for them to go on a trip, like what it's like for them to volunteer with Kids on Computers and be part of an open source organization, and making an impact in people's lives. Like, I never imagined 4 years ago that I would be traveling to Morocco, India, Mexico on a regular basis to help set up these labs, and meeting like so many people, trying to speak broken Spanish, practicing broken Hindi, and broken French in Morocco. I mean, I just like, it's so amazing. Like, it's, I think you'll just get to hear about our experiences setting up the labs, get to hear about what the organization's all about. And we'd love to have, if anybody's interested in joining us on a trip, however or even if you want to help without coming on a trip, we have lots of opportunities. So we're just excited to share our stories and talk about the work that we're doing and how we're trying to change kids' lives for better.
Hey, I know you're just about out of time. You have to you need to get away. So I want to make sure that we've covered everything you wanted to cover. Is there anything that we've left out of this conversation so far that you want to make sure our audience is aware of?
No, just come see us at Scale. If you're there, we'll have a booth as well. So come see us, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, it's been wonderful. I hope I'll see you in person down there at the show, because I'll be at Scale as well. So I'm pretty sure Garrett's going to be there.
I might stop by.
You might stop by. All right, great. Thank you for being on the show. This has been Avni Khatri, who represents the Kids on Computers project. What do you think, Gareth?
It's a great organization. I'm excited that we finally. I'm personally excited that we finally got them to have a presence at Scale. Because I like inviting groups like this, because it exposes more people to it and gets the word out of the great work that they're doing. So I'm really excited to see them at Scale, and I'm just excited that more people will know about the group.
Yeah, the summit looks like a really good thing. I'll have to definitely drop by that. Do you know what day that's on?
I think that is going to be on, it's either Thursday or Friday.
Great. I'll be coming in around 10 a.m. on Thursday, so that'll be wonderful to go check out. So early in the show, I mentioned Sugar Labs, so the Sugar on a Stick project and stuff. And I went back and Googled, and it turns out that was in show 134. So if you go to twit.tv/floss134, we had Walter Bender, who was representing that project, and sugarlabs.org is their website. When I hit that site, it said, it doesn't come up. And I went, uh-oh, are they out of business? What's going on here? But they had an IRC channel listed on the wiki page, the main Wikipedia page for Sugar Labs. And I joined that chat room, and I said, so is sugarlabs.org gone? And they go, no, we just got some server problems. Don't worry. So don't all rush to there right now on the live stream, because it's down right now. But probably by the time you hear this, if you're hearing it in the normal podcast feed, but I think there'll be a lot of overlap there. I think there's some good concepts there. So I'm hoping that maybe there's some cooperation. I mean, maybe they'll run the standard Linux distro, but people can have Sugar on a Stick and use those cooperative programs and those sort of kid-friendly, game-oriented mostly. But it's like playing with games is always a good way to get started, but learning to program that game without too steep of a curve is really a great thing to have. And I know the Sugar also has standard web browsers and things like that too, so they could go ahead and hit Wikipedia, or they could hit Facebook or whatever they want to, using this little software there. So hopefully there'll be some collaboration there. So hopefully I will have facilitated that. Anything else before we move on, Gareth?
Nope.
Okay, great. So we do have some upcoming guests. I have been furiously sending email out to try to fill a schedule. And for the next 3 weeks at least, it's full, which is great. We just added to the schedule, I think, 4 new guests. We have the Krita project, which is a digital painting and illustration application. It came out of the work of, I can't put the name in front of me, but putting the cute toolkit on top of GIMP to actually make it look decent. Sorry for the people who work on GIMP. It actually caused a bit of a fury in the GIMP community. So anyway, they've been working to build this thing that looks really, really amazing. There's even an OS 10 version of it, so I'll have to check that out. We also added Geopaparazzi, which almost says what it means. It's a very fast qualitative engineering and for geologic surveys. And it's also a great way to get your own, track data when you want to, figure out where you've been, like I did all last week when I was in Cuba, to have my pictures geotagged. It's also great for adding elements to OpenStreetMap. So if you're into doing geologic surveys or OpenStreetMap or just GPS tracking, you're going to want to check that show out. 3 weeks from now, we've got SOGO, which is a groupware server with a focus on scalability and open standards. Also, that's been on the schedule for a little while. We also just added, it's about 6 or 7 weeks out, Mohid, M-O-H-I-D, and it's a water modeling system. So you can basically program in, what your surface area looks like, and then you can water flow down in it. And it's really fast and smart, so you can get real-time water simulations. That sounds like a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll get some good graphics on that as well. On the very, very short list, two groups have said, I'm picking a date now, but they haven't actually picked a date, and that's the people that write the NTP software. That's the network time protocol that actually keeps all of our systems synchronized up with the International Standard Time. We also have Docker coming back, hopefully, although, again, waiting for them to pick a date that they might cancel again. Of course, I hope they're listening to this, then they're probably going to be mad that I said that. But anyway, you've heard me talk about Docker 3 or 4 times here, and the timings on the schedule. We do have the big list of who's upcoming, is always on the schedule. That is linked from twit.tv/floss. That's the homepage for this show. And if you go to where it says look for upcoming guest list, I'm going to put out the request again. If you have a project that you would like to see on Floss Weekly, please email the project lead or chief representative or whatever, and let them email me, merlin@stonehenge.com. That provides the least gravity, I guess, like water going downhill. Yeah, it provides the least friction. That's what I was looking for, friction, which is the thing that slows the water down. For getting these things out and on the schedule. So please do that. You can follow us at Floss Weekly on Google+, or we're also at Floss Weekly on Twitter. Everything gets echoed over to there, at least a link to it does. We do have a live chat. We took a couple of questions from chat today. We're normally at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays, the earliest show on the Twit Network. And you can go there. If you go to the live.twit.tv, you can actually see a link to get into our chat room. There's also an IRC mirror of it. That's how I usually watch it. So it's going that way. You can follow me personally, Merlin, M-E-R-L-Y-N, but more often I'm just posting things not to Twitter, but to Google+. I'm Randall L. Schwartz over there. So as I said at the top of the show, I'm back from Cuba. It was an amazing trip. There are new rules for tourists that just went into effect. And we were under the new rules. So even though this trip has been planned for a year and it had very special regulations and requirements, and they would report us to some government if we didn't go to every one of the events that was planned to this people-to-people interaction, there was new rules. The nice thing about the new rules is, where is it? Here's my prop. This is an actual Cuban cigar that I got to bring back in my bag. And in fact, when I got to customs, they said, because I wrote down 2 Cuban cigars. Well, show you, I do have two Cuban cigars, right? Okay, so I declared that, of course, on my customs form, and they said, just last week, if you had done that, we confiscated. We got a lot of Cuban cigars in the back room. I said, wow. So good timing for that. I need to go back to Cuba, too. It's just been beautiful. The other thing that's really weird, more props, is they have a $3 bill. So they don't have a $2 bill. They have can't see that. There we go. Oh, that's right. It doesn't focus closer. Okay, so it's $3 bills. So they spend those there all the time. Let's see. And what else do I have? I also have some music. I brought back some Cuban music. Okay, there's Cuban music CD. So you don't have video on this particular section of the show. You're not going to make a lot of sense of that. I'm describing everything as well, though. I also got to see Buena Vista Social Club, which you might remember from the movie. The movie was made with a group of people, some of which unfortunately passed away now. But the head percussionist, the guy that was in the upper right-hand side of the picture when they're playing, Amadito Valdez, is still in the band. And so he's probably like 90 now or whatever. But so I got to see two of the original guys were actually still in the band. Of course, the rest had sort of rotated to younger people. That was a lot of fun, about an hour with them. The reason you didn't see many posts from me last week is the internet there is all via satellite. And if you've ever been on a cruise ship and you know there's a 2-second lag and there's and it's really slow and it's really expensive, and I had to pay a lot of money just to get a couple of hours of time and only at hotels. Hopefully that'll get all straightened up. The problem, of course, is that the closest landfall is the U.S. So they can't run cables to the U.S. until last week. And so they could only, and going the other way goes across the trench. So that's really, really difficult to do. So that's why we've had horrible internet there. A bunch of people set up a dark net, which was sort of cool. There's like 6,000 people that belong to this dark net, so they can play World of Warcraft against each other and things like that. They're not actually on the internet, but they're sort of like all tied together via cables and Wi-Fi and all sorts of stuff. So it's been pretty fun. As I said, I got to meet a lot of good NGOs and NGO government partners. They're all doing really great things. And of course, the final thing I'll say about Cuba is there's lots of old cars, really, really old cars from the 50s and 60s. And they're prized because everything else that's there is like either Russian made or now they're importing some Chinese vehicles and things like that. So, but the cars are beautiful. A lot of them are being used as taxis, so you could get a ride in an old car like that. And they're very proud of your cars. They have a name for them. They call them Yank tanks, which I thought was cute, Yank tanks. So that's all I'll say about Cuba. I might say some more in the next show or something because I might have thought of something I didn't say this time. I will be at Scale in February, along with our guest and Gareth. I will also be in New York City in late March because I have a cruise and going out of Miami, and I have some friends in New York City that I want to go visit. So, no, cruise going out of Tampa, but that's still close enough, all in the same area. So watch again watch my tweets because they come from my Google Plus, which is where I probably talk about where I'm going to be and when. Probably set up a meetup in New York City because I'm going to be there for a full week. So, I think that's all I want to plug this time. And I bet I know what you want to plug, Gareth.
Yeah, I'm going to plug Scale. Obviously, big surprise there. So Scale is the Southern California Linux Expo. For anyone that doesn't know, it's happening February 19th through the 22nd at the Hilton LAX in Los Angeles, California. So anyone listening that wants to escape the impending snowstorms, come to California. We had a little bit of rain yesterday, so I'm not saying it'll be beautiful weather, but certainly better than some of the storms around the country.
It's true. It's true. Although
so
it might be the 1 week a month that'll actually rain in Southern California.
It's entirely possible. It has happened before.
Yes. And are you still offering that discount code for our listeners?
Yeah. So for anyone using the code FLOSS, they'll get a 50% discount off a full access price. So that gives them access to all the talks on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, as well as our expo halls and basically the whole show. So regular price is $70. With the discount, it's $35. So it's a really good deal.
Absolutely. I look forward to it every year that doesn't conflict with a cruise or something for me. So this time it doesn't. I'll just already be in Southern California, so I'll just simply Uber my way over to the LAX airport. Hilton? No. Hilton?
At the Hilton LAX, yep.
Hilton LAX. Okay, great, cool. Well, Gareth, thank you once again for stepping in at the last minute, helping me out and helping me get a guest and for co-hosting.
Yep, thanks for having me. Always glad to do it.
Awesome. So it's that time again. We'll see you next week on FLOSS Weekly.